a minute of silence and reflection. Be seated. At the beginning of each regular Planning Commission meeting, we allow time for a comment period where anybody can come speak on any subject not related to what's on the agenda for up to 3 minutes. So if there's anybody here who would like to come forward and speak on something that is not on the agenda, please come forward now. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda. We have actually 2 items that have been referred to from the Committee of the Whole. Ms. Hicks, who chairs the Committee of the Whole, was out and is out today. And so I chaired that committee, and I'll speak to both of those. The Z619 Davie, Harrington, Martin, and West Street, the CAM property, was referred back to the full Planning Commission with a recommendation of approval. Because we have not had a public presentation for this case in the full Planning Commission meeting, we're going to do what is normal here for that, which is give staff a minute to review the case and then the applicant an opportunity to speak for up to 10 minutes, along with proponents of the case, and then up to 10 minutes for opponents to come and speak. So let's start with a staff presentation for that.
Good morning. This case was before you at the June and August Planning Commission, Committee of the Whole meeting to request to rezone about 2 acres from DX5 with a shop front frontage to DX20 with a shop front frontage and conditions. The Central CAC voted in favor of the request 15-0, provided that the applicants offer a zoning condition addressing affordable housing. That has not been offered. The Committee of the Whole recommends approval 7-0. Your deadline for action is November 20th. This is the subject site. You can see it is surrounded by downtown mixed-use zoning of various height levels, 25 and 4 and 7 in the immediate area. The case takes up the entire block except for two parcels here. I'm trying to draw, it's not working. Looks like we lost our presentation here. I can still run through it for you. So it's a conditional use zoning case. There are a number of proposed conditions. They prohibit high intensity uses. There's a provision of a sidewalk connecting Davie Street and Martin Street. Portions of that section of the block do not have right-of-way frontage, so they're offering a pedestrian connection. There's a specification of high quality cladding materials for the building, preservation of the facade of Martin Street, including its deconstruction and replacement with cataloging kind of the materials. There's a exhibit that identifies building height and step back for all sides of the block. Some new conditions that came after your first hearing of the case were an offering of 2 plazas of 1,500 square feet at the intersection of Martin and West and Martin and Harrington, the other way. So 2 1,500 square foot amenity areas there. The applicants have offered to document the existing contributing structures with black and white and colored photos and submit those to the city's preservation staff. All right. We're live. This is just a picture of the site. I'll get down to the conditions that we're just going through. There's your step back exhibit. There's a new step back added It's this third one here. And all right, so 7, we're just going through about photographing and documenting existing structures, contributing structures. There you are, number 8, about the 1,500 square feet amenity areas. The final condition contemplates just some parking deck screening standards. This is your change in zoning entitlement. The properties are identified in the in a community mixed-use area on the future land use map. The request is inconsistent with that. Approval of the case would amend the future land use map to be central business district here. So that should be included in a motion. The urban form map shows the area in the downtown core and also in a transit-rich area. There is guidance from the Downtown West Gateway plan here that would recommend 2 to 4 stories in height. The motion made and the recommendation from the Committee of the Whole referenced some outdated information in the plan, or rather how the plan originally identified the station area as a block north of the subject site, and how the higher intensity uses should be considered on this site because of the current location of Raleigh Union Station. Another look at that plan. The request is inconsistent with the plan overall and the future land use map. It's consistent with the urban form map. And if you look, I passed out a worksheet here that will kind of walk you through a motion if you wish to approve based on the Committee of the Whole's recommendation. With that, I can take any questions.
Any questions for staff?
A couple. I wasn't at the Committee of the Whole, unfortunately, so I may be asking questions that have already been asked and answered. The square footage on the ground of this project, do you know how much it is? And the reason I'm asking is, part 2 of this, are they limited by the same 25,000 square foot
The floor plate above 12
floor plate
stories.
for a tower above 12 stories, right?
That's a standard in the code for all tall buildings of that height.
So what is, do you know the square footage on the ground, and what percentage, 1 or 2 towers of, first of all, is there room for 2 towers of 25,000 square feet or just 1?
I don't know exactly the answer to those questions, but I imagine that the site itself is larger than 25,000 square feet.
Yeah, the site is almost 2 acres.
Yeah, 2
There's 43,560 square feet in an acre.
So
So
it's
you're
all-
talking roughly 70,000 square feet or more for the site.
Right, okay.
And there is a tower spacing requirement. So
Sorry?
a tower spacing requirement, the towers can't be butt up against each other.
Yeah.
But just without doing any more math in my head, I believe that you would probably have room to do 2 towers.
So, asking about this because we saw what I thought was a pretty spectacular rendering, potential rendering of this project prior to the Committee of the Whole meeting that I missed. And I'm wondering how much of that rendering is reflected in these specific conditions. So the heights that were depicted don't seem to me to be reflected by that map, but maybe they are. So that's a question, are they?
So the rendering that the applicants prepared for their application and presentations don't provide exactly what heights different portions of that rendering are. What we do know is that looking at this exhibit, which has been offered with zoning conditions, is that on Harrington Street, you've got 40 feet of various step backs from the right-of-way. Beyond that area, the maximum story height is 20 with 250 feet. And so the only thing that they would be bound to in terms of height are this diagram, and then the other base zoning standards for the floor plate that you mentioned, 25,000 square feet above 12 stories, and then the tower spacing requirements.
Ms. McIntosh has a...
Yeah, Mr. Geary, to answer maybe fill in a little bit of information. At the last meeting you were at, we made a request that they update this offset diagram to more closely match the massing rendering they'd shown us, and they did add the, I believe it's the 7-story height offset in response to that request. So they had modified this diagram based on our input at the meeting you were at.
And that applies to 50% of the frontage on Harrington Street, am I reading
That
that right?
third step back, the 10-foot step back applies to 50%. So what that means is there would be some articulation along that face.
The open space so the open space that's on the ground now, what's the dimension of it compared to
The existing plaza at
Yeah.
the CAM property,
Yeah.
I don't
Yes.
know its exact dimension. But what they're saying is that at that corner, that intersection, there would be 1,500 square feet. And then the adjacent corner at West and Martin, there would be an additional 1,500 square feet.
50 by 30, something like that? On each corner?
That's right, each.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions for staff? In my zeal to get started, I failed to mention a new member of the Planning Commission. So let me mention that Jennifer Lampton has joined us as our new member as of today. And there'll be some opportunity at the end of the meeting for you to tell us about yourself. So I apologize for jumping right in. So we'll move on to the applicant now. Does the applicant want to come up and say anything about this project? I know we've gone over it multiple times in the committee of the whole, but just for the recorded record.
Good morning, Mac Paul Gab Smith,
Morning.
421 Fayetteville Street, Morningstar Law.
And Contemporary Art Museum, 409 West Martin Street.
So, yeah, there was a lot of discussion at your last two committee of the whole. I know, Mr. Geary, hope you got your questions answered for today. The massing model that we showed that you saw 2 meetings ago, we made some further changes to, is reflective of the kind of the maximum build out under the conditions with the height, the floor plate maximum being 25,000 square feet. There is a smaller residential structure that was next to the office with a smaller floor plate, but I think it gives you a good idea when you juxtapose the UDO requirements with the zoning conditions, what that site could be developed as. For Ms. Lampman, I'm happy to, show some images, but I'd be respective of your, I know you weren't at the committee of the whole. If you would like to see something more, we're happy to provide it, but there, we've had a lot of discussion so far.
Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there something you want to say before I start asking?
I was just going to thank you for your careful review and be ready for questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right. Okay.
I'm very interested in the the potential for affordable housing in this project. You discussed your desire to include that the first time this came up, Commission, but you haven't offered anything, and I'm wondering why.
You start,
Oh. Gab can fill in, but we had a good bit of discussion about that at the last meeting. After that first committee of the whole, and we talked about affordable housing, and I think even then you heard some of the efforts being made by the applicants who were very interested in including affordable housing in this project. It led to a number of conversations with stakeholders with the city to talk about incorporating an affordable housing component, both within kind of a cultural arts district. And some of the feedback received was, well, it's better not to limit it to one particular group or kind of interest in the city, but have it open, but not clear exactly how that would work under the city's parameters, but wanting to continue down that path. Separately, the owners also have been looking at the idea of micro units. So while they would not necessarily be on a per square foot basis, quote unquote affordable housing, but because of the size of the units, they would be very competitive and more affordable for folks who are working in the city in any number of jobs that may not, pay the market to afford a market rate apartment. So we've continued to move down that path, and I think at the last meeting, at least there was some comfort level that there's a genuine interest and desire to continue to pursue that.
I think that we're continuing to make a good faith effort to find a solution that works for this project. And after the remarks that I made at the first committee of the whole meeting, we realized that the solution was a little bit romantic because creativity and artists are in our DNA, but it's not an equitable solution because it leaves out a portion of our community. And so we want to step back. We're certainly very interested and enthusiastic, but want to make sure we're doing something that is reflective of our belief that it should be equitable for everybody.
Any more questions for the applicant? Okay, it looks like we have 8 minutes and 55 seconds for anybody else who wants to come up and speak in support. Each person will get 2 minutes to speak. Does anyone want to come forward and say anything in support of this case? Seeing none, is there anyone here that would like to speak in opposition? We have 10 minutes for that. Okay, let's bring it back to the table. So just referring back to what Mr. Clem showed us, the Planning Commission recommendation, if you flip it over to the first checkbox, that would be the language that would be used for a motion. So if we want to have any discussion before that, let's talk. If not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. That
This one would be-
rezoning, while inconsistent with the future land use map and inconsistent with the relative policies in the comprehensive plan, but we move to approve on the rezoning request that is reasonable in the public interest because if approved, the comprehensive plan policies will be amended to the subject parcel and only. And in addition, if the property is developed in accordance with the approved ordinance. 2, that the future land use map will be amended as to the subject parcel only from DX5 to DX20. The changing conditions taken into account in this amending this ordinance to meet development needs of the community are that the site has moved from the
Current designation.
that the previous location of Union Station is moved closer to the site, making it more accessible for public transit. Also that the applicant, while not offering public housing or affordable housing at this point, has made a good faith effort to bring that forward as the project moves on.
I'll just say one thing for clarification. I think the future land use map change was community mixed use to central business district.
Agreed.
Okay. Do we have a second? Second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I want to vote for this. I like this project. I hope it goes forward. I hope it includes affordable housing, like the open space elements of it. But it really is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the argument that we should approve it regardless of that, to me, depends on a sufficient offering of community benefits. And so far, that offer is not on the table. So I'm going to vote no. I hope that when this gets to council, that an affordable housing component or micro units or some level of affordability in this project is added so that council can approve it. But I'm going to vote no today.
Any further conversation? Okay, just for my 2 cents, I also agree. I'm concerned about the fact that we don't have anything concrete about the affordable housing in here. However, it is an exciting project, and I am hopeful about the micro units. And so I feel like as the Planning Commission, it's difficult for us to negotiate the affordable housing condition, and I believe that council will have more input onto that. So at this point, I will vote yes for it.
And I'll say I'm also disappointed there's not an affordable housing component, but I also want to applaud the Contemporary Art Museum for their efforts in this design, and I'm excited for the project. And I'll be voting for it, even though I have misgivings about the lack of affordable housing.
And one more comment. Echoing my counterparts and the effort to be a good community partner and show goodwill and good faith is exciting. So I do, again, the lack of specificity and hard details are concerning. I'm going to extend goodwill and good faith as you have shown. Don't disappoint me.
All right.
I know I'm relatively new. My background is in affordable housing, and so I understand the challenges that you'll come across as you plan for affordable housing. If it's not done up front, it's very hard to then pencil it in, because I think, there's other things that will come up in your development, and so then that component of affordable housing could potentially get squeezed. So the more firm you are in committing to affordable housing, like everybody's saying here, up front, you can then set that in stone, and then as other things come up, you can say, no, this is what we've promised. So with that, I don't want to disrupt any progress, because it does sound like this has been a project that's been discussed, so I will vote for it.
Anything further? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Right. Thank you. Moving on, we are coming to, it's listed in old business, but it actually is referred out of the committee of the whole. Z1819 Ponderosa Service Road near the intersection of Falls Venus and Capitol Boulevard. It came out of the committee of the whole on the 22nd of August to the full Planning Commission without recommendation. We are looking for some additional information from staff, I believe. So we will do the whole process for this, so staff, applicant, proponents and opponents.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Planning Commission. The applicant had pledged to submit revised conditions to address some of the inconsistencies that were noted in your staff report. The applicant did submit revised conditions on August 27th. As you can see, the proposal is inconsistent with the future land use map, and originally was inconsistent with the urban form map. However, along with the revised conditions, a revised application was part of that submittal, and it did add the PK frontage to remove that inconsistency. North CAC voted last month 6-5 in favor, and the deadline for Planning Commission action is the 23rd. So this is actually the last meeting at which the Commission could act on this proposal without a request for an extension. You're familiar with the site. It's located generally in the Wakefield area along Capitol Boulevard, adjoining Wake Forest. A little closer in, near the Wakefield Common Shopping Center, Wakefield Hills condominiums. There is a manufactured home subdivision directly to the south. Sorry, trying to remove the graphics here that were applied. Bear with me. Another close up of the site is in its entirety. Would note that this site is split zoned between Wake County, currently in Wake County zoning, HD and R30 to the west, in the western part of the site. The site also borders Richland Creek, which is a greenway corridor. Just a couple of perspectives from the site. This is looking south along Ponderosa Service Road, looking north. The vista there at the end, it does curve around to the left, and that road comes in behind, becomes Common Oaks Drive in behind the shopping center. Just to summarize the conditions that were submitted on the 27th, these first three, the change here is that the applicant has requested relief from the block perimeter requirements through condition number 3. These are new conditions, and again, these pertain to leaving the western 1,000 feet of the property undisturbed, with the exception of any public improvements. And I would note that this area is already in extensive floodplain and floodway areas. However, these conditions do exceed code requirements. The zoning significant here is the removal of the retail entitlement that currently exists under Wake County zoning. However, that is the proposed zoning would increase the residential building entitlement from about 23 units to 190, as you can see from the table. The urban form designation is Parkway Corridor, so PK is part of this rezoning request. And if approved to this requested zoning, which would extend the Urban Watershed Protection Overlay District, by the way, this would be applied upon annexation. Note the consistent policies here and the inconsistent policies. We have just previously discussed policies 9.1 and 11.1 in that this proposal would remove a small area from the employment and business development category of future land uses. Outstanding issues, one change here, of course, the greenway easement. This would be required along the reach of Richland Creek, and that would occur at the site plan stage. I would note number 2, annexation is required. I can report this morning that a petition for annexation has been submitted to city planning. This request would require a future land use map amendment, as it is currently inconsistent with the current flume, and it would amend the map from office, research, and development to medium density residential. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and the applicant is present today.
Any questions for staff?
The greenway easement would be within that 1,000 feet? I was trying to figure out from the maps where Richland Creek is on this site. To the western edge of it, or?
As shown here, sir, yes, that is actually the easement is held by the city, so that is actually a separate parcel. But yes, that condition that would basically preserve the 1,000 feet is at that western end of the property. So there is a direct connection from this site to the greenway easement.
So the rezoning, you list consistent and inconsistent with the future land use map. Is that because of the split zoning?
Because of the split zoning. The parcel, the northernmost parcel that's included in this request is the one that is split zone between the R30 and the HD. So let me reference the report here. Yes, the eastern third of the site is zoned Highway District HD under Wake County, and the remainder is zoned residential R30. And also the future land use map designation is also split on this parcel, on the same parcel as you can see, between moderate density residential and office R&D.
Thank you.
Any more questions for staff? All right, we'll move on to the applicant, who has 10 minutes along with supporters. So,
Good morning. David Brown, Withers Ravenel. I'm here with my colleague, Kelly Race, and our client, Mr. Gray Methvin from KB Home. Thank you for a few minutes to address the Planning Commission, and I also want to go back 2 weeks ago. We were here before you. This body approved a concurrent future land use or comprehensive plan amendment that is running with this zoning request. I believe that was a unanimous recommendation. I know we have some new people here this morning, just wanted to backtrack on that item. I do want to ask a question of staff. I believe the overall case is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall.
That's correct.
We are, and I do want to make that point, we worked very hard with staff and we took some comments here. We've added new conditions, and I think that is what has changed that status. Just a couple of other things. If you look at the adjacent land uses to the north, there are two apartment communities that are affordable housing. There's a third community that is market rate. And then to the south of the subject property, there is a manufactured home subdivision. And we believe that this R10 zoning is actually a very good transition from the more intense uses to the north to the less intense uses to the south. I don't know that we have a whole lot more to say. We've heard this case at the Committee of the Whole, make ourselves available to questions.
thank you. Any questions?
It looks so funny on the map, but how much of that land is buildable, David, you know?
There's a large pocket of wetlands at the very western edge of the site, immediately adjacent to Richland Creek. Richland Creek is the western boundary of the property. There's also a fair amount of floodplain that goes beyond the wetlands. But I would say without the urban watershed, that about 90% of this site is developable. But the watershed requires a 40% tree coverage, which is in our case. And in response to Mr. Tomasulo's comments at the Committee of the Whole, we added 3 conditions to guarantee predictability on protecting the the wetlands, and to protect the stream buffer. And then the last thing would just be to reinforce that we are not going to fill the floodplain, except for the construction of utilities or greenway.
You're going to build on about half of this site?
Barely. Yeah, that's a good number.
Any more questions for the applicant?
I'm sorry, how many units? Is it single family or is it, what do you?
The intent is to build townhomes here. I think the number that we're working with was 90. That number has gone down. I would predict it's probably closer to 80 now. It's still a target.
Yeah, the entitlement is 190, but good luck getting 190 out.
Yes, and there is a restriction against what we would call apartments or multi-unit living, so that knocks that out.
Any more questions for the applicant? All right, so we have time for supporters, if there are any, so please come forward if you are here to support this project. All right, moving on from that, we have, yes, we're going to hit the opposition now, So we have 10 minutes for those opposed. You get 2 minutes per person. And I recognize Ms. Levy, who has been here for the cases. And I have a question for you when you get done with what you have to say.
So I live in the area directly south. Most of my neighbors are Hispanic and don't speak English. They walk, most of them, for their employment to the shopping center above. So no one's coming. I'm the only owner. They're residents in that area. So I want to, you weren't here last time, so I want to remind people that the CAC vote, people were very confused at that meeting because they were voting on an area that was not in Raleigh. and nobody in that CAC meeting lived anywhere near, and there were a lot of people who abstained from voting because they didn't think they could vote. There was a lot of talk about it. Then I want to reinforce it's not consistent with the map. I spoke to the traffic engineer in RS&H, who is the consultant on the Capitol Boulevard improvement, and there's lots of uncertainty regarding traffic patterns on US 1, Capitol Boulevard freeway thing, the impact on the congestion that's Falls of the Noose and Main Street that goes across right above this. And there's no determining exactly what the long-term impact is, but the immediate impact, and the consultant Meredith Van Dyne is very familiar with how congested Falls of the Noose is at Capitol Boulevard, and having more residential on that street is going to negatively impact. The only way out, sooner or later, is going to be through the shop, by the shopping center to Falls of the Noose. All the exits on Ponderosa Service Road are going to be closed off. So that's where everybody's going to be going. So I'm not for it.
Thank you.
And you said you had a question for me?
Yes, I do. I'll let anybody else ask questions before I do. So, any questions for Ms. Levy? I'm sorry. Should we finish the 10 minutes, or can
No, I was going to ask her for her name and address for the
Okay.
record.
Oh, that's right, sorry.
Oh, I live at 10 Ponderosa Park Drive, Wake Forest, 27587.
And your name?
Joan Levy, Levy.
All right. So I do have a question. There was a note in the minutes for the meeting where it said, you were quoted and I've lost it, the CAC meeting, that there were only 2 people there that were able to vote from the vicinity?
Oh, no, yes, from the vicinity.
Okay.
Everybody, it's a very large, it's the largest CAC in the area, I understood, and nobody but myself, who lives in the area and could not vote, despite the fact someone wanted to sell me their vote. And there was only a couple that lived nearby this development.
That could vote because
They
they are in
could
the
vote
city?
because they do live in the Raleigh area. But the
it's-
rest of the people lived way, like, it goes all the way down to Millbrook and Creedmoor. Those people were not anywhere near this who voted.
Okay. And you said, and it says, but there were 70 people in the vicinity that could not vote. Were they at that meeting, or were they?
70 people? I think
Well,
there was
that's what's in the notes, so I was confused.
I don't think
Did
it was
70 people?
70 people at that meeting. There must have been about 40.
Okay.
Yes, 20 to 25.
We'll guess 30 then.
So there were 30 people there that were from the vicinity that could not vote at the CSC
No,
meeting?
there was about 30 people who could vote. They were all CAC members.
Okay, gotcha.
But only, I think, 11 of them voted.
So that, we'll fix that in the minutes, but I wanted to make
Sorry.
sure that I understood
That's right? Got that?
what had happened.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ms. Levy.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Was the,
Well, wait.
is the only objection to this the impact on traffic?
It's the impact on traffic, and it's not consistent with the map at all. This is not what this area is designed for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask David a question? Will there be pedestrian access from the manufactured home community across to the shopping center?
There are no sidewalks on Ponderosa Service Road right now. If this project is allowed to move forward and is approved and constructed, you will see sidewalks. And I also predict with the work going on in Capitol Boulevard, the conversion to freeway, it will bring some much needed improvements to Ponderosa Service Drive to the north and south of this project. There's a fairly substantial realignment of Ponderosa north of this site. Right now, there's essentially a right angle or dogleg intersection, and that becomes a big flat radius. That would probably be part of the Capitol Boulevard Improvement Project. So
the answer was yes to my question.
Yes.
You're going to allow people to walk through your...
public streets, yes, sir.
Good.
And we'll be building sidewalk on both sides of those streets. Sorry, I didn't understand that.
But from your project north or all the way down?
We are going to build the road improvements in front of our project on Ponderosa. It is my understanding that either the city of Raleigh and or the state of North Carolina will be bringing their project to Ponderosa.
And what is that timetable for connectivity?
The question is, what is the timetable on
What is
that?
the timetable for that connectivity?
All right, we've got
We've
Jason coming up to tell us from transportation.
And this is an inch. I'm going to try to find a map here with some interesting drawings on there. I'll use this one. The answer to the timetable question is a tricky one because NCDOT just halted work on a number of projects for an undetermined amount of time, including this one. So we don't know when they'll get back to that. It kind of depends on what their funding picture looks like. They had previously been looking, I think, to have a environmental document for this big project complete a year from now and then go into construction within a year or two. That timetable is really up to NCDOT to determine now. But to clarify a little bit of what NCDOT and the City of Raleigh would jointly do with this project, as I understand it right now, is a Ponderosa Service Road, which is here. You know what, I shouldn't draw on there because it may not come back off if I could.
Are we still not having the ability to clear that?
It must be that we don't. I gather RTN has, you know, that glitch might have caused our problem. But that Ponderosa Service Drive from this site all the way south, crossing the railroad, which Ponderosa does not currently cross the road, and connecting to the next interchange that NCDOT would be building, is what we believe their plan will do, and that they'll build that as a complete street. In this context, they probably wouldn't put a sidewalk on the freeway side of a street that's effectively a frontage road. It would only be on one side. But the City of Raleigh would make sure that they did that and would likely pay for a betterment if their policy didn't require them to do that, though I think their policy now does require them to do that. So there should be a sidewalk contiguous from Common Oaks, where it already exists, all the way down to the next exit south, where the street does not currently exist, crossing the railroad with that project. And of course, the frontage of this very small sliver would be the developer's responsibility, regardless of that project, to build those frontage improvements. Does that answer the questions?
So currently, is there a sidewalk from beginning at Common Oaks down to Ponderosa?
See if the pointer, I'll point with a
Yeah,
pointer.
that's good.
So there's a sidewalk, I believe, until right there,
Okay.
all the way up Common Oaks and then also on Forest Pines. And then what Mr. Brown was referencing is that NCDOT is likely to get rid of this very tight angle right here and want to put in a bit of a radius between Ponderosa and Common Oaks so that it's more of one street rather than a hard right angle. What nobody really knows is exactly what that curve is going to look like. I suspect that RSNH may have a little bit more information about it, but they're not sharing any details with us. We can just infer from their design manuals what that might look like. But effectively, it's likely to be exactly north of this site up to somewhere around the Wakefield Commons Drive intersection, which is a private street. So it'll be something like that. And that realignment would be a part of that NCDOT project.
You probably don't know the answer to this question, but I'll
Try
ask
me.
it anyway. Is there a worn walkway along this area where you can tell where people are typically use?
I do not know the answer to that. I suspect that either a resident or Don may have an answer to that, or potentially the applicant.
We've got a head shake.
No walkway, it's just.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was a, right,
Actually, you really need to most of the time walk on the street.
okay.
And that street is highly congested, especially at rush hour, and those cars speed because they take a detour from Capitol Boulevard through to get to Wakefield, and et cetera, and they use our street to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there's still 8 minutes left for anybody else who's here to speak in opposition. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
I
Okay.
have a weird question, or strange question, but based on traffic that we're hearing, and 80 some odd units going in, would it be possible to put in a stop sign or something? Maybe we can slow some of the traffic down? I don't know if that's an appropriate question for here.
It might be for staff, so. You mean while it's still a jagged corner instead of being
Oh,
a.
I was thinking for the community itself. I mean, maybe it might be nice to have like a right-left turn, but have it actually be a stop sign if we're concerned about speeding traffic come through.
Or other traffic calming measures.
Yeah, yeah, just put a stop sign, so then, okay, you can't, because it's going to be a higher density community, so it might be an opportunity to have a stop sign, slow traffic down, and then people can take a right or a left turn.
You mean at the intersection of the presumed cul-de-sac that they'll build and Ponderosa, make that an all-way stop?
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. It's just a thought if traffic is of concern. And then there's also going to be the sidewalk that he's going to build. So maybe that might, I don't know, provide some influence.
It's not a normal context for a multi-way stop when you have a fair amount of traffic on one street and then a very small amount of traffic on another street. I guess it encourages people to not actually stop because they don't see a reason to, and that traffic engineers have what they call as a warrant for a multi-way stop, and this it wouldn't likely meet that. It's certainly something the city could evaluate in the future, but it wouldn't. In general, putting in a stop sign for traffic calming, absent a lot of the other kind of network of reasons to maybe do so, often causes people to slam their brakes to a near stop and then floor it and effectively or end up making up by going faster in many cases. And this is not Ponderosa Service Road is in our street plan an avenue, which effectively means it's to be a through street, not a high-speed thoroughfare, but a bit of a collector between different neighborhoods. And so we would want to encourage traffic on that street rather than, there is, and I'm going to point again with the pointer here, there is a planned street north-south kind of through this, which if this property north of this were to develop, the development that we're talking about today would stub a street to there and would stub a street to the south. And if property north and south were developed, there'd be another neighborhood street that would provide that connection. Of course, that's dependent on development that is, at this point, I don't know, proposed. But those streets would be slower speed, more neighborhood context by intention of our plan and our standards.
I have a follow-up question related to that. Could you describe what the upgraded Ponderosa street cross-section will look like? There'll be sidewalk added, or is that sidewalk going to be separated from the street, so it might be an improvement for the existing residents?
It's a bit complicated because it's an NCDOT project and it's their funding and it's their standards and it's their right-of-way costs. What I believe and it's also not to the point of being fully planned. What I would expect that to be and what our street standards would call for is a 3-lane section. And I believe that given the bike plan in this area and given the role of this street as providing a bicycle connectivity that Capitol Boulevard itself as a freeway is wholly unsuited for, there'd likely be a multi-use path next to on one side of the street and then no sidewalk on the Capitol Boulevard side. That would be a little bit different than our street standard, which would have 3 lanes, a bike lane on both sides, and then a 6-foot sidewalk, 6 foot separated on both sides. So what we're likely to do is kind of within that amount of right-of-way, shift things towards Capitol Boulevard a little bit, upgrade that bike lane into a multi-use path and only have one multi-use path rather than 2 sidewalks. But that's a best guess, and it's what the city would be providing comments to NCDOT on as they develop designs and move this project forward. But at this point, the project's kind of halted, so we can't officially do that yet.
I guess what I'm trying to get at from Ms. Levy and others is that some of the improvements being made with this may actually make it easier for you to walk up to the shopping center than it is now.
Correct, but the townhouses will be built way before those sidewalks that go further down Ponderosa will be there. So it's just going to increase problems if there's more traffic and less walkway between the houses that are south of this new project. And the other thing is, I believe Jason might be incorrect about that South Street.
You might want to speak
I would
into the
recommend anybody
microphone,
speaking
ma'am.
for the record be on the
Yeah,
mic.
so,
We're asking you questions, so please
Okay.
use the mic.
Did you hear me? Do I need to? Okay. And I believe, Jason, you might be incorrect. Going south, that's a private road. They can't make an exit down to Ponderosa Park Drive. That's our private road.
That is correct. What I meant to say is that they would stub a street to that property line, and if there was a development of her property or the neighboring property, they would connect to that if there was a subdivision.
Okay.
If there would be legal access there, and if the neighbors who had that private connection wanted to use it, they'd be able to, but they wouldn't necessarily have to, and they'd be under no obligation to without a site plan or a subdivision there.
You're still talking about Ponderosa.
We're talking about the Ponderosa Park Drive, Kelly Pine Court. That is a manufactured housing community, and
a private home.
and yes, and so this lot right here is where she lives, and then this area is a it's a manufactured home community.
And where is your sidewalk going to go? You're talking about a different sidewalk from Ponderosa.
Yeah.
Thank you. The question is, where are our sidewalks going?
Yeah, you're not going to build a sidewalk on Ponderosa Service Road. You're going to build another sidewalk, right?
We're building sidewalk inside there, inside the proposed community. We will also be building sidewalk along our frontage of Ponderosa Service Drive.
Okay. Well, it seems to me, Ms. Levy, it seems to me this doesn't make the condition worse. It should make it better.
If I may follow up on that comment, Mr. Geary, this zoning to R10, in my opinion, I can't call it a downzoning because right now we have highway district county. If you look in your staff report, it talks about 150-some thousand square feet of commercial. That's not likely to develop because you would need to develop it under the City of Raleigh and bring forward a City of Raleigh zoning case. But considering what is on the comp plan recommendation today for office and tech, 80 townhomes is a fairly light use in my opinion. And I've been in the development realm drawing plans for 33 years.
May I ask a quick
Yes,
question? Sir. The sidewalk that you anticipate, would there be direct access for Kelly Pine Court?
Yes, anybody walking in Ponderosa Service Road public right-of-way has.
But it would be directly accessible.
Yes.
From, okay.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
One other thing, a lot of these items that we're talking about today are not really zoning specific. They are site plan and subdivision specific. Want to just reassure everyone here, the City of Raleigh has a very thorough preliminary review and then a follow-up construction document review. And that's where a lot of these items get worked out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so any further conversation at the table? All right. So again, referring back to the Planning Commission recommendation sheet that we got, this handy sheet that we got today. If you notice on the first page, there is a recommendation, suggestion as the second thing if consistent with the comprehensive plan policies and inconsistent with the flume, which is where we are at.
You should have one specifically for this.
Oh, is there one specifically? I'm sorry.
Didn't we amend the
So,
future land use? Oh, we
and
did,
you
but
might want to,
council
the
hasn't?
status of, at council.
Yeah,
I know that you guys recommended approval.
Right,
I don't know
right.
if council's.
Yeah.
So tech,
Right. So we do have a specific guidance sheet here for Z1819. So if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, so I'll move that we approve this rezoning Z1819, which is consistent with the relevant policies of the comprehensive plan, and although inconsistent with the future land use map, it's reasonable, it's in the public interest, and I think we anticipate that the future land use map, we've already recommended a change to be consistent with this rezoning, and I would expect that it will be approved if this rezoning is approved. So I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So given there are a number of people here in the audience today that I think are here for the last item on the agenda, I think we'll take that next instead of going to the TC, so that we can go ahead and get these folks processed through. I want to remind folks that the process is that we will hear from staff, then we will hear from the applicant. The applicant and proponents get 10 minutes to speak. And then people opposed get 10 minutes to speak at 2 minutes per person, so that's a limit of 5 people. If we believe that this case, since it has an inconsistent designation with the comp plan, we could refer this to the committee of the whole if we think that's warranted. But we'll go ahead through the process today of hearing the case, and then we'll make a decision about whether to refer it on to the committee of the whole. All right, thank you.
Good morning. Z2319 is a request to rezone 2 parcels from R2 to R10 with conditions. 2 parcels are somewhat odd shaped. I'm going to refrain from trying to use the touch screen since it seems like it will be permanent. So the 2 odd shaped parcels that have an R2 zoning bordered by R4 to the north. This case has not yet been before the Northwest CAC, however, it's on the agenda for this evening. And the action for Planning Commission, or the deadline for Planning Commission action is December 9th, 2019. So again, a little recap on where the case is located and the zoning around it. There's R4 zoning to the north of the site and R2 zoning to the south, and also that is the designation of the site currently. A broader view of the site. It does not currently have public road access, and I have a couple additional maps to just give more context on where it's located since it's somewhat of a unique configuration. But for context on what's located around it, there's generally low-density residential, again, to the north, to the south, and to the east of the site. There's some moderate density residential further to the west of the site. And then as you get over to Leesville Road, there's some commercial you can see sort of along the corridor. And then the closest public road frontage to the site is Strickland Road. Zooming in on the site, you can see it's 2 somewhat odd-shaped parcels. So the dividing line would be right here where there's a power line easement going through. So this is not a road. And then the next slide, I added in a couple features just for context. So as the site does not currently have any road frontage, there's a future road connection that would come from Strickland Road into the site. When this parcel, it's under separate ownership, but currently has an approved subdivision plan, and per the UDO will require a street connection be stubbed through to connect to the subject site. As you can see in the pink lines running down the middle, there's currently a power line easement, and that would prevent a building from going underneath it. And then an additional constraint on the site, the Hare Snipe Creek runs through the site, and this is my best reenactment of the location of the creek. It's not exact, but close enough. So some views from the site, and again, this is a little different from what you're used to seeing since the site doesn't have any public road frontage, so I wasn't able to get a picture of the site specifically, but what this is showing are the views looking to the site from if you were standing on the road looking in. So number 1, this is looking on Woody Hill Drive. It's the nearest site, so if you were standing on the street, this is the first part is a separate property, but looking up top, the site would be behind this property. And that's the same. This is a view from Strickland Road, so if you were looking, this forested piece is not the site. This is a parcel with that approved subdivision plan that will be redeveloped. Behind it is the site. There are 2 conditions for this case. The first is that apartments are prohibited, and the second is that residential density will be limited to no more than 6 units per acre. I included this exhibit for reference. This is showing the approved site plan for the site north of the subject site. So for context, and I'm just showing with my mouse up here, this is Strickland Road up top, and this road you see coming through is a proposed road that would be required per the UDO to connect into the site. So where I have this green text down here is the subject site, just generally in this area south, but this is, just for your reference, an approved subdivision north of the site.
What's the zoning for that subdivision?
I'm just going to flip back to the map to make sure I don't say the wrong. That is R4.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a little line work on here, but so the current zoning is R2 and the request is R10 with conditions, no change to the 6.52 acres. The density that we estimate would go from just under 2 acres, so 1.99 units per acre, to an estimated 5.98 units per acre. That number under maximum units that's obscured is an estimated 13 units could be built on the site today, and the estimation would be 39 units could be built should the rezoning be approved. The setbacks on the site currently would require 20 feet in the front, 15 feet for side and yard side street and side yard setbacks, and the sum of the side and rear setbacks would be 30 feet. Proposed zoning would reduce those setbacks to 10 feet from the front, the side, and the sum of the side and rear would be 20 feet. The request is consistent with the future land use map, and that consistency is because low-density residential recommends a density of 1 to 6 units per acre, and the applicant submitted a condition that limits the density to no more than 6 units per acre. And additionally, there's a second future land use map designation of public parks and open space, and this follows the Hare Snipe Creek that we saw earlier. And the UDO would prevent development along there. There's a requirement for a 50-foot stream buffer on both sides of the creek, so there would not be development within that area, which generally makes this consistent with the future land use map designation. There's no urban form guidance for this area. It's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan overall. However, it's consistent with the future land use map, and again, there's no urban form guidance. The consistent policies are future land use map again, compact development, as this site would allow for a greater density of housing in the area, and similarly zoning for housing, that it would allow for additional housing types in an urbanized area with sufficient infrastructure to serve them. The inconsistent policies are reinforcing the urban pattern. This is mostly relating to a change in the setbacks that would be permitted should this be approved. Density transitions, again, mostly relating to setbacks and a change in the character of the neighborhood should this be approved. Conserving, enhancing, and revitalizing neighborhoods, and infill compatibility. And these relate to the same points that there could be a change in the character to the neighborhood, and the setbacks would be different than what is permitted, which again would be related to character policies and general fit. The deadline for action is December 9th, 2019. There's no CAC vote, so that is the outstanding issue, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. Please. What would the setbacks be for R6?
Oh, I'd be happy to pull that up and take a look. For R6, they would be the same as R10, so the primary building setback would be a minimum of 10 feet, side street is a minimum of 10 feet, side lot line 5 feet, the sum of the side setbacks 15 feet, and 20 feet from the rear lot line. So again, the difference is the sum of the side setbacks is slightly less, or slightly greater in R6 than it is in R10.
And as long as we're asking, can we check on R4 too?
Sure. So R4, the primary street setback is 20 feet, the side street setback is 15 feet, side lot line 10 feet. The sum of the side setbacks would be 20 feet, and again, these are all minimums. And from the rear lot line would be 30 feet, so it's quite similar to the R2.
Right. They could do townhouse.
In R4.
Townhouse on the site under the proposed zone, which would have different setbacks.
Gotcha.
Just one, is the intent to compare what could be developed on this tract under the zoning from a setback perspective to the adjacent properties?
Yes.
Okay, so the setbacks for townhouses are different, but they're also geared to the lots on which they're placed, and many townhouse developments don't, have a common area between the lots and adjacent properties. But of course, if that's something that we wanted to see, that would have to be specified in a zoning condition because you could theoretically subdivide townhouse lots up to the back of the property line, and then those setbacks would control.
So I see that in the analysis of incompatibility that what would bring this case back into, or make it more possibly compatible with the comp plan is or consistent with the comp plan is the setbacks and lot sizes and building types. So I gather that that's where these questions might be coming from. You're fishing to see if we can get it to consistent, right? All right. Any further questions right now for the staff? All right, then let's move on to the applicant. You have 10 minutes to present your case and for anyone in support to speak.
My name is Janet McLean, and I'm the owner of the 2 tracks. And
could you state your address for the record, please?
119 Lincoln Court, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that I understand why I have a lot of opposition to developing the property, because it was used over 40 years very much like a free amenity, and it's a beautiful wooded area that they can, walk through and so forth. And I want to say that I want the project to be visually. I want it where they cannot see in it. I'm talking about evergreens planted around, just as the project, just as the townhouses that's west of the Springdale Estates. So this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to work with the neighbors. There will be no impact on their area, their community, because it's landlocked. And it'll be one way out and one way in, and they will not even see the units.
Okay.
And that's why that's all I have to say about it. I'm not sophisticated about the technology and what needs to be done and all of that. I'm leaving that to the planning department. They've been very cooperative, and we're trying to work with a very difficult piece of property. And but I read their letter, and it appears that they do not want me to develop that property at all from the letter. But I have been paying taxes for 45 years. They have enjoyed the property, and now it's time to move on and develop the property in the right way.
Thank you. Ms. McLean, I do have a question for you before you leave. So right now your case is inconsistent with comp plan. Would you be willing to work with staff to bring it into consistency by working on the lot sizes, setbacks, and building types?
Well, the setbacks, building types, I would want. It's a very difficult piece of property, and for the value of the property, I would like to develop it in a way that it can bring the value of the property up.
Sure. But if it's inconsistent with the comp plan, it makes it more difficult for us to support a case like this. So that's why I'm suggesting to you that it be something that you look into with staff. So anyway, just asking you the question if you're
What would you want me to do?
That would be something you would work with staff to work out, but I think we might have some suggestions here.
Well, there was a recommendation in the planning department's summary of the proposal, and they were suggesting additional conditions for the rear and side yard setbacks that more closely mirror the built conditions of the surrounding area, and also providing additional tree conservation and planting areas.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I hope that they will not be it shouldn't have any impact on their community, not traffic or anything. Now, there's an easement that I've been approached by Mr. Odessa, who we have the easement on his property. We worked very hard, my mother and I worked very hard to have access to the property. And so it's a legal easement, and he has approached me to buy the rights back, which I will do if I get the approval for the property.
And I think what the chair was getting at is that if you were able to work out some additional conditions about the setbacks,
yes,
then
yes.
we'll be more able to approve it.
Yes, we'll be able to do that. I'm very cooperative, and I would like to see it done in a way that would not impact on the community.
You're going to the CAC meeting tonight,
Yes.
and all these folks may be going too, so perhaps you can work something out with them starting tonight. About setbacks, you're saying your project, whatever it turns out to be, won't be visible?
No, it won't be visible.
That's not assured by the application.
Okay,
so far.
We will add those whatever is necessary to make it invisible to them. So when they look out their backyard, they'll see the same wooded area without any with evergreen ground, so they can't see into it. Because that's what we had a neighborhood meeting, and it was packed. We didn't even have we had standing room only. And it was several things that they brought up about property values and all of that. But actually, the townhouses right next door to them, there's 113 of them that they have a one-way entrance on Leesville Road, and that seems to have been it. That was built in 2002, so. It's nothing different here, except that they will lose the amenity.
So it's consistent.
They'll lose their
It will be
amenity.
consistent on both sides of the road is what you're saying. There will be a sense of consistency within that neighborhood on the other side. It's the same thing.
The same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
It'll be a road that connects under the power line, but either side they will not see. It'll be surrounded with evergreen trees where you won't see in it. And it probably will be a gated community, turn out to be a gated community. And the entrance would be from Strickland Road. I think I gave you a sketch of what it is, a little homemade sketch there. But it tells you what I would like to have. And like I say, I sympathize, I understand the emotion about it. It's beautiful, that little piece of land is very beautiful. And because I walked it not too long ago, and I said, I understand why they want it. They don't want it disturbed. But I have to think about myself. I've been paying taxes for 45 years, and I haven't been able to sell that property or develop that property or anything because it's landlocked. And it was deliberately landlocked too. My family went through quite a bit of problems. It's we were mistreated. We were mistreated very badly.
I'm sorry for that, ma'am. But I do also have a question in terms of the amenities that you're saying. How is it being used as an amenity to the community?
They harvested wood off of it for the fireplaces. I used to go in and I saw stacks of wood, saw where the trees had been cut. I said nothing about it. They had a tree house on it, on my property. They had little trails. I saw where there was a little campfire, all the things that you would like to use, like to do, and right there in your backyard. So it's convenient and everything. And I understand that, but I understand what I need.
Thank you. Any further questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. Thank you, Ms. McLean. So are there any folks here to speak in support of this zoning case? Okay, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Planning Commission. My name is Iris Marbett, and I live at 11220 Patty Hollow Lane, Raleigh, North Carolina. I am here to speak in favor of rezoning the property in question, which is in Springdale Estates, to R10, so that we can build townhouses on that property. In an effort to meet the needs of families, subdivisions in Wake County offer different types of dwellings. Townhomes don't bring down the prices of single-family homes in a neighborhood. Most subdivisions have different types of homes in their subdivisions. They have large homes with home theaters. They have 3-story townhouses, and they even have apartments. A lot of people prefer to live in townhouses rather than in single-family homes. They are safer places to live, especially if you travel a lot with your job or you work long hours, because the homes are close to each other and the neighbors can look out for each other. Many have the square footage of single-family homes and require less maintenance. You can have a beautiful yard and you are not obligated to take care of it. Compared to older single-family homes that need to be updated, these will be brand new homes. They will offer a lot of space, new appliances, and other amenities. Families with children and busy schedules, wherein they take their children to soccer practice, dance lessons, cheerleading, and etc., don't have time to mow the grass, plant a garden, or even flowers. Older, empty nesters, like living in townhomes, they don't have the upkeep and maintenance.
Ms. Marbett, that's your 2 minutes. Do you have more to say? I mean, that's your 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support? All right. Do we want to grant Ms. Marbach a few more minutes, or do we want to?
I'm make a motion that we grant her maybe another 2 minutes.
Another 2 minutes. Would you?
Do you have more to?
Yeah.
What
do you need for?
All
right.
Okay.
Do we?
Motion is second. You want to?
Yeah, all right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
I was saying older empty nesters like myself, like living in townhomes. They don't have the upkeep and maintenance of single-family homes and offer lots of amenities. Again, I say, townhomes don't lower the values of a neighborhood. They just give people different options for the way they may want to live. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, gathered there were no more proponents, so let's move on to opponents of this case. So again, you have 10 minutes total, 2 minutes per speaker. So, and please, we ask you not to repeat the points made by previous speakers. So we only want to hear new information. So please come forward if you'd like to speak in opposition. And if there are going to be others, come sit down in the row in the front so that we can move you through quickly. So there'll be room for 5 of you to speak.
I'm Kirk Stoll. I live at 8837 Woody Hill Road. I represent 3 property owners on Woody Hill that directly abut the subject rezoning property. We completely support the objectives of diversity in housing in Northwest Raleigh, and we understand that infill is going to occur, and we're glad we live in such a vibrant community where people want to move and live in our neighborhood. But there are appropriate places for multifamily housing, near activity centers, near transit lines, near arterial highways, and as a transition from single family to commercial. These are just great examples. This site is none of the above, and it's really not walkable to anything. It's a very isolated location. But you can't separate the engineering considerations from the planning in this case. And I think we need a site plan to see what was envisioned, because the shape of the parcels and a number of other constraints is going to make this very, very difficult and expensive to develop. And I was a practicing licensed civil engineer for over 30 years. I've done my own sketches, and I'm seeing 1,100 feet of roadway, an expensive creek crossing, the 100-foot wide power line easement. I can't see how the site can be developed, and I ask that that be part of your consideration in this rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Stoll. Just as a quick response, have you guys have you had the opportunity to see the sketch that we've received today? Was that at the neighborhood meeting? No. Okay, so you'll have a chance probably to see it at the CAC meeting tonight.
I have a question. May I have a question now?
Let me, and I'll let you ask the question next. Mr. Stoll, don't leave. It sounds like we have a question for you as well. Also, I just want to ask staff to weigh in about the need for a site plan in order for us to go through our deliberations. So could you just speak to that, please?
Well, any site plan you would see as part of this conditional case is illustrative, but it's not part of the zoning conditions. So you would either have to be satisfied that the narrative conditions would, when applied, produce a result that was substantially similar to what's being shown,
right,
or you would need to see a plan development zoning application, which of course would, for the applicant, would have much higher overhead in terms of its preparation than a standard conditional use case would.
So a site plan would only be illustrative for us, but we can't rely on that or request that as part of a zoning case.
Outside of a planned development district, no.
Okay,
And
thank you. I just wanted to
add to
clarify.
that. That's in the UDO as well.
Okay.
That's a UDO requirement.
Just want to clarify that it's difficult for us to ask for a site plan that we can make any sort of deliberation over and decisions upon. So just putting that on the table for you now so that you're aware of that.
I've seen some conceptual drawings
Right.
in some of the earlier discussions today. That would do it. Just show us how you think this is going to work.
Stan.
But,
So
you know,
hopefully-
R10, if it's not developable, we need to know that, because R10 will cast a shadow over all the adjacent properties forever when the site might likely never be developed.
Okay. All right. But I just wanted to put that on the table for you, and I believe Ms. Winters has a question for
I do
you.
have a question. You were talking about the expense that was involved with this. I'm sorry. You were talking about the expense that was involved with this. I'm just curious if the abutting community would be responsible for any of that expense.
No, I'm talking about what a developer would have to spend to be able to develop this property, the infrastructure, roadways, sewer, stormwater management, all within the site, but expended by a developer, all to have maybe 2 acres left that could be built upon.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. We'll move on to the next opponent. You have 2 minutes.
And if I could, I'd like to submit this. This is what he actually did prepare.
Okay.
So that you can see what the difficulty is. My name's Jim Brennan.
And your address, please.
And my address is 8817 Katharina Court. I'm here to represent the Board of Directors of the Springdale Estates Association, which we've been here for 50 years. Number one, I want to say the applicants never suggested to us in any form or fashion that anybody's been on her property. The real access to her property is from Strickland Road, which has a gravel roadway that they can go underneath. the power lines. So any damage she's talking about could just as easily come off Strickland Road. And there's properties to the north. Let me address a few things where this is inconsistent. Number one, we're talking about a 30-foot setback. If you actually look at what's going to be developed north of there, there is nothing within 100 feet of her property that's going to be developed. That's a street. Also, if you could distribute this, excuse me, could you distribute this to the members? She's saying that nobody's going to be able to see this. And when we're talking about a 30-foot setback, I don't think that's possible. I gave a handout if you would take a look at it. This is for the Leesville Preserve subdivision that's coming in on the back end. Sorry this is taking more than 2 minutes, but I didn't want you to see the handout.
I would suggest you go ahead and make your point.
Okay. My point is she's saying no damage and nothing bad's going to happen to us. That's what the land looks like when it's cleared above. And if you're talking about clear cutting up to the property line to do a 30-foot setback, what you are doing in this particular case, the creek that you see is a half-mile away from the runoff. That's Snipe Creek. In addition to that, on each side you have the 50-foot buffer. So there's 100 feet.
Thank you.
30 feet is a big difference. Please take a look at that.
All right, thank you. Next speaker, you have 2 minutes.
Hey, good morning.
State your name and address for the
Yes,
record.
Leanne Fromm, 9412 Owl's Nest Drive in Springdale Gardens. Our lot backs up to the power lines that everybody's been talking about. Just a couple points. It's not that we don't want this to be developed for this nice lady. It's just we'd like for it to be consistent with what's around there. And as you've seen, that's R4 and R2. The other concern is at this time, from what I understand, there are no plans to widen Strickland Road. And that is the only access, as she has pointed out, in and out of her new proposed rezoning. So it's already overcrowded in that area, especially with the schools and everything that's going on. And so that's another concern that we have. As it's been mentioned, the overall consistency with the comprehension plan. And I note that the key policies, all 4 of the items that were mentioned that are inconsistent are part of the key policies of that plan. And so it's not that we don't want her to develop it, we just would like for her to do it in the manner that is going to be surrounding, keeping in mind the access to Strickland Road puts a huge impact on everybody in that area, and the 3 subdivisions that are going to be most impacted are all represented here today, and we certainly look forward to the meeting tonight at the CAC.
All right, thank you very much.
May I-
All right, so
may I make one comment?
did we have a question?
No, I have more so of a comment for the next presenters. As I'm sitting here and we're discussing this, I would like, if at least one frame of reference to refer to the applicant as Ms. Macklin and not she and her and nice lady, because she's been in this process for a while, so just give the respect of acknowledging her as such. Thank you.
All right, we'll take the next speaker, and we have an additional 38 seconds that someone might be able to take at some point. Please, your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is George Ryan. I live at 9614 Allsbrook Drive. That is the Winbrook community, which is located directly to the north of Strickland Road, where these 2 properties will be developed. We are opposed to this. I am opposed to this. I'm only speaking for myself. I have been a member of the Homeowners Association Board of Directors, but I am here representing myself and many of my neighbors. The plan is for a road to come to Strickland and intersect directly with our road, Allsbrook. Allsbrook Drive right now is already having safety and traffic issues. Because of the 2 schools that have gone in and just because of the traffic on Strickland Road. We also believe that this will change the character of this area by going from from R2 to R10, makes it a very different kind of neighborhood than what is surrounding it. We're also concerned about the environmental issues with a feeder creek going into Lake Lynn. And finally, the precedent that it'll set for other lots of this nature that surround our development and surround other parts of North Raleigh. We think that there are ample opportunities to build residence townhomes in other areas that are not as congested or that have more easy access. And as stated earlier, we're not opposed to development. We'd like to see development. We'd welcome neighbors, but we want it to be consistent with the properties that surround us. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
So can I ask you a question? To build townhomes on this site, you have to be zoned R10. You can't build townhomes with an R6 or R4 designation. So would you object to townhomes per se? Or would a smaller number of townhomes be satisfactory, do you think?
Personally, I have no issues with townhomes. My son lives in a beautiful 3-level townhome in Baltimore. It's a very congested area, but it's not so much the type of structure as it is changing the zoning. Because we have found in other proposals to this nature that they didn't specify what they'd build. And it could have been anything from apartments to townhomes. So I wasn't aware that they had restricted their development on this particular property to townhouses. This is the first time hearing of that.
I don't know that they have, actually. I'm just saying if they want to build townhomes, they need a R10 or RX.
But they can condition it down to fewer units per acre, so it becomes basically an R6 with townhomes.
That was my point. It's conditioned to be R6, and at this point, we can...
use your microphone, please.
I'm sorry. That was just my point, that the condition here is R6, not R10, with R10, with the condition of no more than 6 units per acre. That's all.
Just want to make one final point. The property that's being developed that would have the connector road to these two properties, they are R4, and they have, I don't know, 20 or 30 homes that are probably going to be planned for those lots. So,
thank you. That's your time.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, we have 2 more minutes for somebody else. Anyone else? Please come forward. Please come forward to the microphone. And state your name and address for the record.
My name is Susan Ramsey. I'm at 8821 Trailing Cedar Drive in Springdale. And my question has to do with the easement that she mentioned and the potential purchasing of the additional property. My concern is that that would allow for entrance to the developed property through Springdale.
Yeah, what was the question, please?
The question is, if she buys the additional property next to the easement, then can that become an entrance into this property? And so not only would be the entrance on Strickland, but also through our development. And we're certain. Okay.
So, yeah, could you please come forward to the microphone so that we have your response?
Mr. Odessa wants to buy the easement, the rights of my easement, and that I will do, and that cuts it off. There's no other entrance or exit but Strickland Road.
All right, as far as your plan development goes.
My plan.
Or your planning goes. So I think Jason has come forward. Do you have a response or a question?
I wanted to point out one thing about the easement that many of the residents are probably not aware of. And I have no knowledge of the easement itself, but it is not possible in our development ordinance to subdivide this property and use that easement for access. In order to subdivide this property, they need to have access to a public street, which conceivably can only be provided by the subdivision to the north that's approved. That doesn't mean they couldn't use the easement, but not with the subdivision.
All right, so it's possible that the easement could be used for a road, but not with a subdivision.
More clearly what I'm saying is that if that easement exists as an access point, the applicant could build one house on that lot. and have legal access. If the easement says what I have been told it says. Our development code does not allow a subdivision of this property to use that as an access point. It needs to have access to a public street,
Okay.
which is
So-
approved to the north.
Okay. So there would,
Excuse me.
by the rules that we have in place, be only that one access to Strickland Road, because even with, if something were to happen with that easement, there's still no way that she could use it, or it could be used to go.
It could
to
not be an
another-
access to a subdivision.
Okay, it cannot be an access to a subdivision.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, that helps.
Can I ask another question?
please.
Just the approved plan, future development that is here on our page, that, just to confirm, that has been approved. The road and access point to this site has been approved. This is what it's going to look like, regardless of the development or not?
I'll return the question to staff.
So I'm glancing at that page. Okay, so that in front of you is not approved. That is a sketch that was provided by the applicant. However, the image up top, yep, that is a snip of the approved subdivision, and that road will be provided regardless of the rezoning.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So we've had comments from multiple neighbors. We had, oh, sorry. We've had 5 neighbors come forward, 10 minutes total. So if we refer it to the committee of the whole, we'll take in more input. But right now, we won't take any more input in today. We're done today. So we're going to bring it back to the table and decide how to deal with this case. We know it's going to the CAC for a first hearing tonight. It won't be voted on until October. We know that the applicant is looking into, or should be preparing to look into, conditions that will bring it potentially into compliance so that it's consistent with the comp plan. There'll be more time for the neighbors to discuss this at the CAC and outside of the CAC for the next probably month, because we won't have a CAC vote until October. So what's the pleasure of the commission? Would we like to send this to the committee of the whole for more input from the neighborhood? Would we like to see how the CAC conversation goes and hear it at the table, or hear some input from staff about how that CAC conversation has gone and how the conditions are coming forward at the next Planning Commission meeting in September, and then decide at that time whether to refer it to the committee of the whole? What's the pleasure of, are there any other options I missed, Travis or Ken or Catherine? Those sound like the options we have. Yeah,
I would say this, I would also like to hear in terms of not only the conditions that they're coming up with, but also how Ms. McLynn, I'm sorry, did I pronounce your name correctly? Ms. McLynn has worked with staff to try to bring it into compliance. Again, having the conversations and listening and giving more depth to it, considering this is our first look at it.
We're definitely not going to vote on this today.
Yes,
So
I'm just saying in terms of the other reason why I would like to see it.
Go ahead, Mr. Geary.
Well,
I see.
I think we've got a better chance of working through to some positive resolution through the committee of the whole.
Okay.
It may not be necessary to deal with it there, but
Okay.
I think that's a useful step.
So the committee of the whole falls after the next Planning Commission meeting, if I remember correctly. Is that right? So would it be enough time to refer it to the committee of the whole after the next Planning Commission meeting, if that's our preference, or do we need to?
Well, we wouldn't know the CAC vote until...
We won't know the CAC vote, but we will know more about the staff conversations with Ms. McLynn at that time. So
your next Planning Commission meeting is 2 weeks from today on the 24th, Tuesday the 24th, and the Committee of the Whole meeting is 2 days following, which is the 26th on Thursday.
So we could hear how things are shaping up at the next Planning Commission meeting and decide at that time to put it into Committee of the Whole, or we can decide today to put it into Committee of the Whole. So.
Correct, but if you wait 2 weeks and have the conversation, the referral to the Committee of the Whole wouldn't happen until October.
That's what I was asking. So would there be enough time?
Right.
Okay, so let's decide amongst us how we want to deal with this. It sounds like we have a preference to go ahead and send it to Committee of the Whole.
My thought is to give time for discussion with staff before it gets to that, see how much can be ironed out before even we vote to get to the Committee of the Whole. It sounds like there's a lot of discussion that's going to need to take place. So I think that may be too aggressive a timeline to think in terms of committee of the whole at this
Right,
point.
no, I wasn't suggesting committee of the whole at the next meeting. I was
Right.
suggesting committee of the whole when it's
Some
ready
point,
to
right,
be.
yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we should just hold it.
Hold it at the table and see how things are going in 2 weeks. All right. We will not take public input at that time. We will be deliberating at the table in 2 weeks about how to proceed with the case, and we'll be hearing from staff about how conditions are shaping up and what the conversation at the CAC meeting was like. So you can watch it on TV and find out what happened, and you can check our minutes to see what happened. You don't necessarily have to show up if you don't want to. So there will be plenty of time for more conversation about this in one venue or another. So just know that we've heard you today, and we know that there's more to hear. But hopefully some of the things that concern you will begin to be addressed. Right. So we'll just hold it at the table for 2 weeks. We don't need to make a motion to do that. So we're going to hold it at the table for 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from you, and we will hear from you more in the future. I'm sorry, so you're not able to hear? All right, so we're going to move on to the TC. Let's give people a minute to get it clear of the chamber. If everybody could move out to the hall, please, so that we can move on to our next item. If everyone could move to the hall so that we can move on to our next item on the agenda, please. All right, let's go ahead and begin TC 819.
Okay. So I'll be brief just in my presentation. So this is TC 819. It's a text change related to two, I guess, really three different boards, two that are more or less paired, the mechanical and plumbing examining boards, and the other being the housing appeals board. So in essence, TC 819 would...
Hold it for a second. Folks, could you guys move out into the hall, please, so that we can continue our agenda? Thank you. Give them a second. Thank you.
Okay. So in effect, what TCA 819 would do, first, it would be dissolving the Housing Appeals Board. The function of that board and the responsibilities associated with it would not go away by any means. They would just shift to the Board of Adjustment. And I'll get into kind of the details for that. The second function of this text change would be dissolving the mechanical and plumbing examining boards. This is an effort to reduce redundancy with a task that's now being directed by the state. So just quickly, the Housing Appeals Board was established to hear appeals from decisions made by the city's inspectors, tasked with enforcing the minimum housing code. So these are conditions related to minimum standards for human habitation in terms of the function and quality and condition of housing units. However, this board has not heard a case since 2013. There's considerable time and upkeep needed to staff a board of that nature. And the city council has felt that shifting that responsibility would just reduce the burden of having to staff a board that really doesn't meet very frequently. And it's now allowed per North Carolina general statute, as you see there. So again, any appeal would still be heard. It just would not be heard by a separate board. It would be heard by the Board of Adjustment. Moving on to plumbing and mechanical examining boards. So they were originally established to fill a void that existed with the state licensing program, which really looked at master contractors versus journeymen. And in today's world, a lot of these master contractors hold multiple contracts and on multiple properties and multiple job sites. So they're not actually on site supervising all of the work as it occurs. This was to allow journeymen to actually be on site to ensure that the work was being done to code and being supervised properly. Again, that was the city kind of filling in a gap in the state's licensing program. As of 2016, the state of North Carolina began licensing these journeymen, and so not really a need for the city to have its own board as it relates to plumbing and mechanical licensing. So those are the two kind of outcomes of the text change. They were authorized separately, but we chose to combine them because they're both having to deal with these boards and the dissolution of them. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but the information contained in your packet is kind of the overall justification.
Any questions for staff?
Anyone on these boards now? Is anyone going to object when their board is abolished?
I believe that.
I think that's
Travis
probably
can
not
answer.
too
The answer is no. I don't believe they've been populated for quite some time.
Yeah, I know there was quite a long lull of vacancies and no one wishing to fill those vacancies.
Any other questions or comments? So the city is the applicant?
Yes, I believe
Okay,
so.
so is there anyone here to speak in support? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? All right, let's bring it back to the table. Are we ready to make a motion? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move we approve, I don't have the number in front of me. TC 819 as recommended by staff.
reasonable public interest comp plan.
Because it's reasonable, it's very reasonable.
There is a
It's so in
statement
the
if you'd
public
like on the
interest.
back of your packet.
It's reasonable in the public interest, consistent with the conference.
And consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes, thank you.
Second.
And, all right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes. Thank you. All right, so let's see, where are we on the agenda? Okay, so the committee of the whole draft minutes. And we did have that information straighten out, the Ms. Levy's comments about that one item. I'm trying to find. And I noticed that there was a sentence that started that said, Chris Seabrook, a neighbor, spoke of traffic concerns on South Saunders and wonders if the applicant would be willing, and stops. So I'm not sure what that was, but I don't know how to finish that sentence. I don't remember.
Look at it and make a correction.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments on the minutes from the Committee of the Whole on 22nd of August? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then the Planning Commission meetings from August 27th. Any comments, concerns?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on. Report from the chair. So I have nothing specific to report. We have a city council meeting next Tuesday. I don't plan to attend, and Tika would have been my backup, but I don't know if she'll be available. So last time we had Bob stand in for me. So Bob, would you be willing to do that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. And at this point, I would like to go ahead and officially welcome Jennifer to our Planning Commission and ask if you'd like to share any of your thoughts and your background with us.
Sure. So it is a pleasure to serve Raleigh. So this is very exciting for me, and thank you all for welcoming me the commission. My background is 20 years in affordable housing primarily, multifamily investment from the equity standpoint as well as the debt, as well as very specific low-income housing tax credit program investment. I currently work for a developer based in Ohio, family-owned. We own, operate, develop affordable housing throughout the Midwest and in the Carolinas. And so I appreciate the opportunity to bring my area of expertise to the Planning Commission. I can even speak to, NCHFA is the state agency that awards tax credits, and so it's very specific on how they award tax credits. So I'm hoping that my background will help inform, we have to be within a mile of a school, we have to be within a mile of a grocery store, drugstore, and all these other components that are required for affordable housing. And being that on the developer side, I understand some of the comments about the easements and the power lines and, working with, high density. So I hope that all helps. So thank you. I appreciate being here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Any reports from the members?
Yeah, we had a meeting of the Transportation Committee this morning, and two Jasons walked us through Charlotte's TOD ordinance, Transit-Oriented Development Ordinance, which was really interesting to, I think, everybody. They have attempted, with some success, I think, to construct a predictable formula for conditional use cases. And I think that's something that would be useful to us as a commission, so that instead of having conditions offered or extracted in one-off fashion, kind of ad hoc, Charlotte has established a formula where certain offers are yield certain benefits. Taller building for affordable housing, taller building for additional open space, taller building if the building is LEED certified, taller building if the development contributes to surrounding transit projects and sidewalk projects. We don't have that kind of transportation-oriented development ordinance yet, but I think Raleigh's headed in that direction. So I think we, as a commission, it's useful for us to be on a learning curve about this. Shelley and Michelle raised good questions about how we assure equity in outcomes on our BRT lines, which will in some cases serve in the first instance upper income neighborhoods, and how a TOD ordinance will comport with our scattered site affordable housing policy. And these are questions that the city's going to have to thrash through. But I think we are beginning, the council, we and the development community are beginning to grapple with them. So it was very interesting to me, and I'd be happy to, I suggest everybody take a look at those slides that Jason Harden prepared of what Charlotte's ordinance is. Not so much for the specifics of what the ordinance is, but the approach. The specific numbers that Raleigh will use will be crafted in Raleigh. We won't copy Charlotte, but I think the approach is good. So that's what we did this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Geary. Any other reports from members? Okay, time for the report from the planning director.
Thanks. Well, it's good to be back.
We're glad to have you back.
So there was a council meeting on September 3rd, and they acted on the following cases that were previously heard by the commission. So Z319 Harrington and Peace, that's the large 40-story rezoning, was approved with an affordable housing condition added based on the framework prepared by our Housing and Neighborhoods Department. TC5B 18 Mobile Retail was approved with amendments to hours of operation when close to residential uses. Two items were scheduled for public hearing on September 17th. They are Z1919 on Southwest Street and TC419, the erosion and sedimentation control text change. CP 519 Ponderosa Service Road was scheduled for public hearing on October 1st. 2 items were scheduled for public hearing on October 15. They were Z1019 South Bloodworth Street and Z1119 Grove Avenue. The public hearing for CP 2B19 Coordinating Land Use and Transportation and CP 2D19 Greenprint Raleigh Sustainable Development comp plan amendments was closed, and the items were deferred to a November 12th work session. The public hearing for Avon Ferry Road corridor study was closed, and the item was held until September 17th. CP 2C19 Economic Prosperity and Equity Expanding Housing Choices was referred to Growth and Natural Resources Committee. Z719 Rock Quarry Road was referred to the Transportation and Transit Committee. Z1619 Fayetteville Street was held until September 17th. The sign conditions were not available at the time of the meeting. TC 618 Cottage Court was granted a 60-day time extension. You had been asked for a 90, but you got 60. They would like it back while all of them are still there. 2 items were granted a 90-day time extension for Planning Commission review. They are CP 619 Blue Run Lane and CP 719 Sumner Boulevard. In addition, the council has authorized a text change to amend the conditions associated with Z1917. So that would be another TCZ case coming your way.
All right, so pending items. Was there a question? Oh, another TCZ. All right, so pending items, next week we'll have text change committee at 4 p.m. and on September 17th. Everybody knows who's on the text change committee now, I think. And CJ is now leading that meeting, chairing that meeting. So there was a mistake on the online version. It did not have the cottage court listed, so we have a paper version that shows the 2 TCs that'll be in committee that day. So the next transportation meeting is the 8th of October, but you're talking about changing the daytime perhaps because of the 8 a.m. situation.
Yeah, we can't get into the building at 8 a.m. anymore. So we have 2 options, either meet at 8:15 and hustle to be finished in half an hour, or find a different meeting time. And we didn't really have time in our truncated meeting this morning to discuss which of those would be preferable. So I guess if it's all right with the commission, I'll be in touch with the members and see what you want to do.
All right.
So the members are David, Michelle, Shelley,
and me right now.
you, okay.
But I will probably be, I had thought we had a Wake County representative coming on, and I was planning to assign him to the transportation committee. That's not happening now in the near future, potentially. So I need to go back and look at the transportation committee again, and I will send out the membership
Jason
again.
Harden volunteered. He may regret this too. I mean, he did such a good job with Charlotte's TOD ordinance. We said, gee, are there any other cities out there that have TOD ordinances? So he was going to look into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll communicate more on the transportation committee, and you are going to continue to chair that for the time being. Okay. So our next regular planning commission meeting is in 2 weeks, and then the committee of the whole meeting is 2 days after that. Is there anything else we need to say about the schedule? Okay. Anything else we need to discuss? All right. Then I will call this meeting adjourned.